Good afternoon, everybody. So for this last class, before our final exam, I decided to do something a little bit different. Rather than the traditional course, usually during each semester I bring one guest. And the purpose of that is to allow one executive to share his experience, share some of his insights with you, and for you obviously to have an exchange with him. So this is obviously not possible while in confinement. However, what I did is I contacted one of my very dear friends, who is a very, very successful person here in Monaco, based in Monaco and London. His name is Gavin Sharp. And you will see, you remember that one of my main philosophy in leadership and in management is how to reconcile the human aspect with the business aspect, right? And Gavin and I share this sort of outlook on what a true leader should be. And I thought it would be interesting for you to hear from him his outlook on authenticity in leadership, how to be an authentic leader, what it means to be an authentic leader, and why is it so important to be an authentic leader, to really live your leadership through your own values, to express yourself in whatever you do. And so I asked Gavin to do half an hour, it ends up I think being 40 minutes, but half an hour presentation on being an authentic leader and how this may contribute to your management skills, to your leadership skills in the future. And I listened to his presentation yesterday, the one that you will experience in a few minutes. And frankly, I was very moved. I think he put the exact right words at the right time, and his speech, or his presentation, it's not really a speech, but his presentation really moved me, and I think he says what I want to say, except that he says it in a much better way. So I'm sure you'll enjoy. The presentation is about 40 minutes. Please reflect, spend time reflecting. He's asking a lot of questions, which are very deep questions that I think have a lot of meaning and a lot of values for you. And I think this is a perfect way to end a class on organizational management, on how to manage teams and how to manage situations. It's a perfect end to what I think was a great course. Then we'll have the exam, and then we'll start another course on operations management, but I'll tell you more about that later on. So now, please enjoy Gavin Sharp. He's very disappointed he cannot interact with you, but he was very, very excited to conduct this class for you. He did put a lot of work onto it, and I'm sure you will truly, truly enjoy his presentation. Enjoy, and speak to you soon.
Hello, welcome to this seminar on authentic leadership, succeeding by being your true self. My name is Gavin Sharp, and for about the next half an hour, we're going to go on a journey together. We're going to go on a journey into the world of corporate leadership. And I'm going to invite you to think about questions such as, what do you think makes a successful leader? And similarly, what do you think makes a leader unsuccessful? If you've had experience working in a company and you've worked in a team, as you reflect back to that experience, what made the leaders that you admired admirable? What made the leaders that you didn't relate to or didn't admire, what made them not successful in your eyes? And I'm going to talk about the concept of authentic leadership. I believe that one of the most important qualities, one of the most powerful weapons that we have as leaders or potential leaders is ourselves. And I believe that the extent to which we can take our authentic selves into the workplace correlates with how successful we will be. It correlates to how relatable we are as leaders. But speaking from experience, it's also incredibly difficult. How much of myself is permissible to bring into my workplace. And here's the catch. Different workplaces will have different norms. So your workplace may say, come as you are and be as you are. And my workplace may say, we're very strict about the corporate rules. And you either fit our mold or you don't. But you need to leave yourself behind. So those are some of the questions around authenticity and leadership and success that I want to talk about. So before getting into it, let me first share with you something really important. And that's that I have no idea what I'm doing. And by that, I mean, I have never given a lecture to nobody before, a lecture in cyberspace. I am really used to seeing people's faces and their expressions. I'm used to looking in the front row and I can see who's fallen asleep. I can see who's left the seminar, who's on their phones, how many people have tried to kill themselves, all those kind of signs that I need and want and value for feedback. So forgive me if I'm going to be looking at you for the feedback. It's just the force of habit. Also, because of the nature of my work, which I'll talk about, I ask a lot of questions. So usually in a seminar, I will also say, please interrupt me. Put your hand up and ask questions. And I will ask lots of questions of you. So if there's a really awkward moment in this recording where I'm asking a question, waiting for an answer, just bear with me. It's going to take me a while to realize that there's only me in this room. I'm alone. So forgive me. However, I do recommend that you have a piece of paper and a pen, because I am going to ask you to reflect on a number of topics. And then at the end, there'll be some questions and answers for you to follow up more formally. But I am going to ask lots of reflective questions to you. And the last thing to share with you before we get started is about the technology. Because I've never done this before, I haven't done the technology. So you're going to see me at times kind of look up the top of my screen so I can switch to the slides, or down to the bottom so I can pause the recording. So when you see me going like this, it's not because I've been smoking something really funny and naughty. It's because I'm trying to work out the technology. So please bear with me, and I hope what's coming will be useful, and I hope it will be enjoyable. So let me tell you very briefly about myself and my career to date. So as that slide just said, I began life, I'm going to give you the really small version, otherwise the whole half an hour is gone. But here's the small version. I began life as a corporate lawyer in the City of London. And I realized pretty quickly that actually I wasn't well suited to being a lawyer. I think I became a lawyer because my parents wanted me to become a lawyer, and that's not a very good reason to stay in law. So I went into the corporate world, and I spent the next 15 to 20 years working in the corporate world. And initially I worked for a company, and I went into executive search, and I worked for a recruitment company that specialized in placing lawyers into law firms and companies. In 2 or 3 years after working for that company, I left and I set up my own company with a colleague. And we set up what was to become one of the most successful recruitment companies in the legal recruitment space. And we ended up with offices in the UK, in Italy, Germany, France, Spain. We had affiliates in America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And for the best part of 15 years, I ran this multinational conglomerate, for want of a better word. And I ran it up to a certain point in time. And that point in time came when I no longer felt that what I was doing was congruent with my true self. I didn't know how to be an authentic leader. And I realized that if I couldn't be authentic in the workplace, life was becoming increasingly less fulfilling. And so my journey took me to a certain point in time when I realized the importance of being true to myself. And if I couldn't align my true self with my corporate self, then I needed to do something different. And that was the point at which my business partner bought me out of the business. I sold my shares and I walked away from the company that I founded because I needed to do something where I could be true to myself and where I could be an authentic leader. I'm going to come back to some of those terms shortly, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my story later on. But I went on to train to become a psychotherapist and an executive coach. And today I work with individuals and couples and companies that share something in common. They're all looking to make profound changes. With the individuals and the couples, it may be around their relationships. People come to me because they suffer from addiction, depression, anxiety, sexual problems. Couples come together to see me because they're unhappy, and companies because they want their leaders to become better leaders and sometimes more authentic leaders. So I'm using that word a lot, and I will come on to define it. But let me give you a very practical and slightly light-hearted example. What if this is you when you're at home and you're relaxing? Now, I accept I'm showing a white male, but I didn't have that many pictures available. But you get the idea. This is you. This is who you are. But what if when you go to work on a Monday morning, this is what's required? You have to put a nice outfit on. You have to be corporate. You can see how excited this guy is in the bottom right-hand corner here. So this is you, and this is what's required in the workplace. So let me ask you this question. How much of you should you hide in order to be successful at work? And if you're going to lead a team, do you want your team members to suppress their natural selves? Do you want them to look like these sausages? Or do you want this? So I ask these questions because this is what I believe we come up with every day in the corporate workplace. How permissible is it for me to be me? Okay, let me ask you a different question. Okay, I just realized you're not in the room with me, but that's okay. Let me ask you a different question. I'm going to put up a slide of half a dozen leaders, and I want you to make a note on a piece of paper. You can do it mentally, but a piece of paper is better. And I want to know, when you see these leaders come up, what's the immediate reaction? Good, bad, authentic, inauthentic? How do you react to them? So here's the first one. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Immediate reaction to him. Do you imagine working with him and for him would be fun? And if so, why? Or how about Steve Jobs, one of Apple's most successful leaders? Now, we all know Steve Jobs' life story, how authentic this man was in the workplace. He gave himself 100%. But most of the people who worked with him and for him found him to be despicable, found him to be very difficult to work with and for. So my question is, does that make him a successful leader, or does it make him an unsuccessful leader? Do you aspire to be like Steve Jobs or a Mark Zuckerberg? Let me give you a couple other ones. Here we go. Now, there is no question that this man is a leader because he leads the free world. He has won an election. Sure, we can debate whether he won the popular vote and we can get into the semantics, but he is the leader of the free world. He's the president of the United States. And until we got into the coronavirus, he was running a pretty successful economy with a very successful stock market. So is he successful in your eyes or unsuccessful? Would you like to be working with him? Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most successful leaders and familiar faces of all time. What comes to mind when you see his picture? Two more. Margaret Thatcher. Now, I'm a Brit. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister from 1979 for about, I think, another 12 or 13 years. She was Britain's first female Prime Minister. She had huge success, objectively, with the UK's economy, with her reform of trade unions. She's also probably, even to this day, the most divisive leader ever. And there are so many stories of the people who worked with her, who said she was rude, she was patronizing, she would have no hesitation in humiliating her colleagues in public. So again, how do you see her now? Sorry, there's two more. Harvey Weinstein. So the whole Me Too movement kind of came out of discovering that this man had treated women in the way that we now know he treated them. But yet he's also one of the most successful Hollywood producers of modern times. So is this man successful or not? Is he a leader or not? And Barack Obama. So when you see his picture, what happens? Do you find yourself smiling? Do you find yourself being angry? Do you find yourself having a warm feeling? And if so, why? So I guess why have I set this up? I've set this up like this because I want you at this point in your education and your lives to be thinking about what kind of a leader do you want to be? What kind of a team might you lead? And what's the barometer? How do we measure success? So when I go into this future workplace and you're running your chain of hotels, and I say, okay, tell me, do you think Bob or Mary or Joe, do you think that they're successful? How do you think your team, what criteria are they going to use to rate you, to evaluate you? Okay. Authenticity. What do we mean by authenticity? So 3 or 4 questions I'm just going to ask you to reflect on. Can you ever remember a time when you acted inauthentically? So in a way that felt at odds with your deeper values. And then the other side of that coin is, can you remember where being your authentic self felt so good because you shared openly your opinions and your perspectives and you just felt validated? So, classic example is I've gone out sometimes and I've been at a dinner party and I may not know the host or the hostess that well. And I'm sitting next to someone who has a completely different political view than mine. Brexit's a classic example. Now, let's not worry about whether I was for or against Brexit, but let's just assume for argument's sake that I thought Brexit was a bad idea. And here I am sat at the dinner table and the person next to me saying, isn't it great that the UK will leave Europe? I'm so excited. And an inauthentic response, assuming that I wanted to remain, would be, oh, you know what, I'm not sure I can be bothered to have this conversation. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. And then we move on. My point is, I think we've all at times compromised our own authenticity. And my question today is, in the work context, does that matter? Do I always need to be authentic at work? And as a leader, what's required of me? So why is this important? And is there any evidence, is there any research that shows that actually being authentic at work makes a difference? I'm going to be more profitable. My teams are going to be more happy. Well, let me share some research with you, which I think is interesting and will elucidate the point. Okay, first piece of research was done by Google. And Google wanted to know why some teams were successful and others failed. And actually what's really interesting is it came down to how authentic the team leaders were. So their research showed that the teams who shared their authentic selves with co-workers perform better. So I don't know yet, we'll come on to that, if go back to my picture of the man with the nice earring in his nose and the punk hairstyle, does that mean that he showed up to work looking like that? Or does it mean that he just was a bit more courageous about expressing himself in the workplace? Don't know. But I do know that the research shows that teams who share their authentic selves with their co-workers perform better. Now, in order for us to be able to express ourselves authentically, we have to feel it's safe. So the second thing that the Google research showed was that we need to work in a culture where there's psychological safety. Because I'm not going to be authentic with you if I feel it's not safe to do so. Let me move on, I'll give an example. So psychological safety, the sense of trust, respect, acceptance. These are the things that make the environment feel safe. So let's assume, for example, maybe I'm a gay man or a gay woman, and actually I'm in an environment at work that's very homophobic. So therefore it doesn't feel safe. So when people say, hey, what did you do at the weekend? I may not say, oh, well, I went out with my gay friends, or I went to Pride, or because it doesn't feel safe. So the Google research shows two things. Workplaces need to feel psychologically safe. And when they do, and I allow myself to be vulnerable and to show up, we all perform better. Couple more pieces of research. One was in this journal, Personality and Individual Differences, which by the way, I never heard of, but there we are. They looked at the relationship between workplace authenticity, job performance, and job satisfaction. And they came to this conclusion that's really not that startling, but acting authentically at work is just as importantly as acting authentically in life. And the Harvard Business Review basically said it doesn't mean it makes life easier. Actually, it probably makes it much harder because I'm more likely to disagree with my work colleagues. But again, if it's psychologically safe to do so, I can share my thoughts and I can share my feelings and I can do it with respect. So let me just pause there for a second. What am I trying to say at this point? I'm really trying to invite you to think about what makes a good leader. I hope I've shown you some research that says, actually, if we can be authentic at work, we're going to be better leaders. So that's great in theory, but what does it mean? What is authenticity? So I'm going to just share with you 2 or 3 definitions. And here's one I really like. Authenticity is being able to say how you think or feel without this fear of judgment or retaliation. Being able to say how you think or feel without worrying about retaliation. Brené Brown said, the core of authenticity is the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable. And psychology today, to be authentic means you're able to express and share what you think or feel in a relatively unadulterated form. The third one is just a repeat of the others. So to be authentic, for me to be able to state how I feel and how I think or what I think, means I also need to have a degree of self-awareness. So very often we say the best leaders are self-aware because they actually know themselves well enough to be able to then express how they feel and who they are. So self-awareness is really important. So here's the problem with all of this. If we're saying it makes a big difference to go to work and be authentic, the challenge is lots of companies and organizations do not want you to be you. And the goal is you need to find a company that matches your own value set. Because when your values are not aligned with the company's values, that's when it's really difficult to be authentic. So go back to my example of I'm running my own company. And each year I realized that the focus on profits was the most important thing. Every survey that ranked us as we were the UK's most profitable recruitment company, full stop, in any sector. And each year I realized you had to pursue profit above all else. So what does that mean? That means there's no room for poor performers. There's no room for people who are struggling. The culture is such that we are pursuing profits above everything else. And then I realized that I don't fit in that culture. I don't want to be in a company where the only thing that we value is profits, because then there's no room for my humanity. And there's no room for your humanity. It doesn't make it wrong. It just meant that I didn't know how to get that balance right. And companies very often are very black and white places. We need to make a return to our stakeholders and we value profitability. So this is me. Actually, this is not me. This is a picture that I took from the internet, but it's a very adorable baby. And what you need to know from this presentation is that I was a very adorable baby. And if you're not sure, you ask my mother and she will confirm it. However, I'd like to share 2 theories from the world of psychology, which is the world that I now inhabit, about why authenticity is quite a difficult thing to embody. So the first is a theory by a 1950s British psychologist who was called Donald Winnicott. And Donald Winnicott has this theory that we all come into the world with this sense of who we were meant to be. This is our true self. We are spontaneous. We don't filter our responses. This is the person that I was born to be. This is my true essence. And we call this the true self. And what Donald Winnicott realized is that as we grow up, and as our parents tell us that there are parts of us that we shouldn't show because it may not be socially acceptable, what do? We gradually adjust our behavior to protect ourselves from disappointment. So when mom and dad say, you can't do this or you can't do that, or being jealous is not an acceptable emotion, being angry is not an acceptable emotion. Now, as a therapist, I would say to you, there's no such thing as an unacceptable emotion. Emotions just are. They're a reflection of how we're feeling. But what we do, we hide those parts of ourselves. And instead, we project out to the world what we think the world wants to see. And this is the full self. So let's say my mother was really not that interested in me as a person, but I got a lot of attention when I did well at exams. I got a lot of good attention when I performed well at school. In the end, I'm going to repress parts of myself, and I'm going to make sure that the full self, the part that does really well at exams and really well at school, that's my full self. And basically, I begin to lose touch with who I am. And the more people say, oh, Gavin, you're so good at this exam, you're so good at work. Actually, it doesn't really mean anything, because the person that's being rewarded is my false self. It's not my true self. So it never really feels like I've received a compliment. Another way to look at exactly the same concept, just a different theory, was one of the founding fathers of psychotherapy, is an individual called Carl Jung. I nearly said it's a guy called Carl Jung, but he wasn't really a guy. He was one of our founding fathers. And Carl Jung said that we all have these parts of ourselves that we don't like, or we think society won't like. So we repress them. This is our shadow. It's the side of our personality that contains all the parts of ourselves that we don't want to admit to having. And the more I repress them, the more I'm not even aware of them. So I distance myself from any behaviors that I don't feel comfortable with. So why am I sharing this with you? What's this got to do with authenticity? It comes back to my point about self-awareness, that the first thing that's really important for any leader is I have to know my shadow side. I have to know that I'm capable of anger, of jealousy, of hatred. I have to know that there are parts of myself that I don't like. And the chances are, this is quite interesting when you think about teams. If you hate a person, the chances are that you hate something in him or her that is part of yourself. Because what isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. So let's assume that Mary's in my team, and I cannot bear the fact that Mary is so disorganized and she's not very punctual. The chances are there is a part of me that is disorganized and not punctual, and I don't like that part. So self-awareness is so important. For me to be authentic, I first need to know who I am and my likes and dislikes. Okay, so as we come to the end of the presentation, I just want to summarize that what I'm saying is that psychological safety at work is what will set up a culture and an environment that allows authenticity to exist. So I'm going to give you the source at the end of this because I actually now can't remember. But I really like this about how do you create psychological safety? What does it look like in the workplace? Well, if there's an environment where people are kind and respectful to each other, even if they've got a different opinion, that's a good sign. Or if I'm, as a leader, I'm able to listen to other people without talking over them or cutting them off. I'm able to acknowledge other people's wins out of goodwill and support for them. I have this belief that my co-workers are doing the best that they can. And I support my colleagues by showing up to their events or lending a hand in their projects. These are just signs that I'm in a company, it's safe, this is a safe environment. So what does authenticity look like? Authenticity, well, I share information I'm comfortable with about my life outside of work. And that helps my co-workers get to know me on a personal level. Now remember, self-awareness. If it's my first day, then not everybody needs to know that, hey, I voted Donald Trump, or I am a member of this political party, or whatever it is. So I also have to have self-awareness that I don't have to go in on the first day and tell everybody everything. But I do share mistakes I make at work, and I'm open to feedback and new ideas. I share my thoughts and ideas with my team to be transparent and open. And I ask for what I need, and I express my feelings with colleagues. Let me just pause and share a story with you. One of the stories that I am most proud of was when I was running this large organization. And this was kind of towards the end when I was realizing that why was I trying to pretend that I was perfect? And I wanted my staff to see this perfect leader, this perfect CEO. And it was such, can I say bull? Well, anyway, I won't say it, because I'm human. So one of the directors comes to me one day and she says, Gavin, I made a most terrible mistake. And I have, actually now I can't even remember what the mistake was, but she had done something, she had forgotten to send off a candidate's CV. And because of that, they hadn't got called for an interview. I think that was it. And she was mortified and she just was so apologetic. Shall I resign? And I just said to her, relax. We all make mistakes, but I wasn't able to reach her. And about 10 days later, I called this same director into a room and I said to her, I need to share something with you. And she said, what is it? And I handed her a piece of paper and I said, look at that. And she said, what is it? And I said, have a look. And I said, today I sent the email to the wrong person. That was an email that was meant for Fred and I sent it to Joe. And she looked at me as if, and then said, why are you sharing this with me? And I said, because I wanted you to know that we all make mistakes. And I was remembering what you said to me 10 days ago. And I want you to know we all screw up and it's okay. And I felt bloody fantastic that suddenly I could bring a piece of my humanity into the workplace. That to me is what being authentic means and showing up to be authentic. I accept if you're working in a large company and you have a boss and you say, I screwed up, it may not end in the same way. So that's why self-awareness, and that's why it's not always easy to show up and be authentic. But it's the only way now I know how to be when I do work with companies and when I work in teams. I need to be authentic and I need the people around me to feel safe enough that they can be themselves. So when I said to you, I'll tell you more about my story, I lost touch with my authenticity. Like I said to you, it was about pursuit of profits. And I didn't know how to be human and how to demand the highest standards from people. I just couldn't work it out. And when you think about what makes someone successful, the challenge in the corporate world is that success is very often measured by money. And that's tough because it's an external measure. And wealth can only have meaning in comparison to what somebody else has. So you are forever measuring yourself against somebody else. And at what point do you actually say, you know what? I think I have enough money. I think I have enough success. So I work today with a number of corporate executives as a therapist who keep telling me, you know what, when this deal happens, I'll be happy. When this deal happens, I'll be happy. And I usually say to them, no, you won't. Because actually there's something else here. There's some early childhood wounds that you're trying to repair. And it's not going to happen because there's another zero in your bank account. So for me, I had to really think about my definition of success. And I realized it was so much more internal than external. And I like this quote from Marianne Williamson. When we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So for me, what I take from that is that when I can go into a workplace today and I can be vulnerable and I can share something about my struggle and my story and my humanity, I give you permission to do the same. And that for me is what authenticity is about. But it's tough. So let me finish by giving you an example. So congratulations, you are now the leader of one of the most successful hotel chains in the world. Well done. Give yourself a round of applause. This is the problem when there's just one of me. It's just, can we have some applause? No. So you're running this really successful hotel chain, and you are being asked by the CO to make some cutbacks, and you are going to need to let one of the following three people go. And I just want you to think about everything that we've done today around success and authenticity and what parts of you get touched. So here's the first one. Meet Mary. There's no picture of Mary, but let's imagine Mary. And Mary is hotel manager in your London property. And this is the most profitable hotel in your network, in your European base, because the hotel is always at full occupancy rate. Now you need to do some appraisals because you're going to have to decide which one of these three managers needs to go. Here's what you need to know about Mary. It's the hardest hotel to recruit for because everybody hates Mary. Mary doesn't treat her staff well. Mary is a bully and she's also racist. So you need to decide whether or not this profitable hotel, that's probably one of your flagships, and one that you should be proud of because it's so profitable, but you spend a huge amount of management time on this because nobody can work for her for more than a week, then they quit. That's Mary. Julian, he runs your hotel in Nice. This is a loss-making hotel. However, the hotel gets the best ratings on TripAdvisor because Julian's not very commercial and he's always giving away spa packages. He gives free nights to clients. Client comes down one morning and says, oh, there was a draft in my room. No problem, we don't charge you. And everybody loves working for Julian because he's such a nice guy. So unlike I can't remember her name, unlike Mary, whose hotel is profitable and no one wants to work for her, everybody wants to work for Julian. You just can't make any money from his hotel. Lastly, you have Eve, and she manages the hotel in Berlin. Now, this hotel usually makes a loss, or it kind of breaks even. And Eve is a nightmare because she is very slow in reporting her figures. She's always sick, so you can never get hold of her. And you've just discovered that she's overspent 50% in the last quarter. So that you know, Eve is pregnant and her husband was recently signed off of work due to a terminal illness. So they're all paid the same amount of money. So you have to work out, your global CEO has said, look, one of these guys has got to go, and then we'll somehow manage the hotel with other staff. What comes to mind? You have your racist bully, but it's a great hotel. You have a hotel that doesn't make any money, but for the brand, this is so good. You don't want to lose this hotel because the reviews are just the best. Or you have this one in Germany where you're losing money, but you have a pregnant manager whose husband was signed off due to a terminal illness. So I share these three with you because this is what will be required of you at different times. And different parts of yourself are going to get touched when you think about, should I repress the part of me that doesn't like people who report their numbers late? Should I state that? Do I repress the part of me that lost a relative to cancer and I know what that's like and I want to turn a blind eye because that's who I am? Which part of you is going to show up for your team? So we are at the end. And I'm going to finish where I started, which is, what kind of a leader do you want to be? What kind of a team might you lead? And if I was to ask the people in your team how successful you are, how do you want to be measured? And what I hope that you take away from today is that obviously what makes a good leader is partly subjective, because you and I may disagree on what makes a good leader. But at the same time, what makes a leader can also be objective. And when we go into the workplace, what's required of us as human beings and what's required of us in the corporate world sometimes conflict. And I hope, if nothing else today, what you take away is just some pause for thought at some of the dilemmas that come up in the workplace and how you're going to prioritize what's important for you. As I said, what kind of a leader do you want to be? So thank you for listening. Of course, I have no idea if you were listening or if you just pushed to the end, but there we are. There are some follow-up questions for you. I would love you to give Bertrand some feedback, what stood out for you, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, or you can just email me directly as well. You can email me, it's Gavin@rivierawellbeing.com. That's Gavin@rivierawellbeing.com. So I thank you for listening. As I said, I hope you've been listening. I hope our paths will cross at some point. I am so grateful to Bertrand for this opportunity to present to the university, and I wish all of you continued success with your studies. And I hope we are all out of confinement soon and we get to meet in person. Thank you again, and look after yourselves. Bye-bye.